before we start getting into the meat of everything. So, how's everyone's month been? How y'all doing?
My hot water went out
Oh no.
for several days and I got it back this morning.
Oh.
And I
That's
took the
back.
longest, hottest, happiest shower that I've had in a long time. And I thought, you talk about traveling in time and going back and all these wonders, but it's like, no, stay
the,
here.
that thing for me, I did not take very good care of my teeth as a child,
Uh,
and so I've needed to have lots of dental work done. And I've looked at some dental history and been like, man, I sure am glad I live in modern times. Hello, Fofacy and Marion. How are y'all doing? Um, yeah, my month has been a little like I think I'm ready for a break. But thankfully, I'm getting a break because next week my company is giving us a couple of days off on top of the holiday. So that'll be nice.
nice. I think it's wisdom. We need it this year.
It's a
Yeah,
it's a good time for it.
I'm looking forward to my holiday break for sure.
Maybe I'll catch up on some of these books that I have piled up that are
Ooh.
all like mostly recommendations from y'all that I haven't been reading because I've only had
Uh,
time to do the book club books.
my copy of Harrow has just been sitting on the
I know,
shelf staring at me every
right?
time I walk past. I'm like, I will read you, I promise.
Yeah, I have a similar thing where this book that I'm really excited to read has
Mm.
just been like staring at me for like a whole month and a half. I haven't touched it, even though I want to read it. You know what I've been reading instead is um, holiday romance novellas. I'm in, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna get into the holiday spirit or whatever. I'm kind of a Grinch normally, and so it's basically like a Hallmark movie, but in romance novel form.
Right.
And I read one, and I was like, that's pretty good. And then I read like four more.
Oh my gosh.
Clearly 2020, like those are relentlessly optimistic, and you may have just needed that. Like,
I think that's
get
what
a
it is.
fix. I don't,
Yeah.
Just need a little bit of like mindless happy cheer.
That's what I've been watching on Netflix is like all those holiday movies and just be like, yep, this is nice. Look at this little made up situation of nice normalness ish. Beautiful.
So good.
2020.
Oh, 2020. All right,
well,
I had to double check. I couldn't remember exactly the name. I know what my book suggestion's gonna be. I've got it filed away
oh,
for later.
cool.
As I was like, what am I gonna pick? I didn't mention this earlier, but Tree, I love your Rex helmet in the background.
Oh, thank you.
It's
I
magnificent.
I do the Gish hunt every year, and they did several mini. Do you know? Have you heard of that? It's like a scavenger hunt that the
Oh,
supernatural
oh,
fandom does.
is
And
it Gishwes?
yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah,
do
I have
that
heard of
every
that.
year, and they did some mini ones that were just the weekend. So one of them was, what would your stormtrooper do? What did they really want to be when they grew up? So mine wanted to be a fairy. So I had the pink wig, and I had wings, and I had a bunch of stuff shooting out, and then I had a fairy stormtrooper, and that was what I did for number 36 or whatever it
Oh,
was.
that's magnificent.
We get into like crazy trouble. I delivered a bunch of. I had to go trick or treating in costume, so I dressed up like Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory and went door to door to get food, and then I delivered it to the food bank in costume. So that was another
Oh,
one that we did for
Oh,
Halloween.
nice.
that's
Uh,
fantastic.
it One year I was supposed to take some sweet stuff to first responders. So I live out in the country, and we have all these little local bakeries. So I got some like artisanal donuts and took a whole bunch of them to the fire department. It's really close, like half a block. And that was about 10 in the morning. And by 8 o'clock, my house was on fire, and they were all at my house putting it out. And I was like, well, this worked out well because Gish got me there to be grateful for them in general before I had that profound, like, personal thankfulness.
Makes sense to me.
It was
Uh,
good.
Fofacy has been binging Letterkenny for the upcoming new season on December 26th. And then when we started talking about Gish, both Fofacy and Marion have done Gish before, and Fofacy says, "Tree, remind me to show you pics from our previous
Oh,
years."
yeah. Too good. I don't think I got the coffee table book this last time, but a lot of times I do that. And that was so my daughter, as a teenager, was really into supernatural and used to dress up like Castiel and go to, like, I think we went to Otakon, and I got her like a London fog trench coat, and she had the honey for the bees and everything. So she's the one that sort of dragged me into Gish. But I have to say, it's fun, and I've met some wonderful people there.
I love fandom so much.
Right?
Yeah.
Pure and happy, and I miss them in person, and I want to just fly into a sea of nerds.
Our fandom time will come once more. It's just being patient until we can get there.
Well, I'm just so amazed at, well, I don't know what I am. I'm very gratified at the way that you have pulled the community together and been there for each other online at a time when so many people are missing that in-person thing. It's really impressive. And I've noticed in some other groups, like we'll do D&D, and it always seems like there's something going on, and I feel the need to go in and mediate stuff. Right? But I don't feel like that when I come to Goblins and Growlers. Like, it's just so chill. I love it.
There's something about pretending to be other people that brings out the drama. I think part of the reason why the Goblins and Growlers server manages to maintain the peace like it does is because I ran on World of Warcraft, I ran role-playing PvP guilds for multiple years. And you want to talk about drama getting deep. That's the game being thrown to the wolves for sure. So I think having that experience, I've got a good nose for who the good beans are, and we have a lot of good beans on our mod crew, and those good beans make all the difference.
Good beans.
What I see is that when things start to go a little kilter, it gets self-corrected and balanced before, like it goes off at the knees before it ever manages to go up, and then everybody feels relaxed and heard, and it perpetuates that way. You guys just do a great job.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're at the 7:10 mark just about. Do we want to get into it? Do we want to start talking biz? Are we all equipped?
I have poor impulse control, so I'll always be ready.
Okay. So I was the one who recommended Guards. I've been reading Terry Pratchett since I was 17 or 18. So I didn't start as early in life as I could have, since Terry Pratchett has been releasing books longer than I've been alive, which is awesome. But I feel like I got in early enough in my life to be able to like grow with Terry Pratchett some, which has been a magnificent experience, and has helped me be a little bit more kind in my sarcasm as a person, if that makes any sense. I think
total sense.
I think he handles satire really well, and I really love just like the world he has created in Discworld in particular. So I unsurprisingly finished the book kind of under the wire. I actually finished it a little bit earlier today. So I have very fresh thoughts about the end of the book and slightly less fresh thoughts about the beginning of the book. But how did everybody feel about the book this month overall?
I loved it.
I read it very quickly because I was very bad and put it off for a long time, but loved it. I think it's very generous sarcasm, and I like that a lot. It's like, aw, that's like so mean but sweetly put, and it's nice.
Lauren, I know you had to wait a long time This has been on your shelf to be read for an exceptional amount of time.
Yeah.
So was it worth the wait?
Uh, yeah, I think it was. So it must have sat there for like a year. I picked it up. It was at a used bookstore because I was like, Terry Pratchett. Yeah, there's like a whole, section, and I'd heard so much good stuff about Guards, and it was really fun. I really liked it. I'm not that experienced with Discworld. This is just the third or fourth maybe that I've read, but I think it might be my favorite.
I think this is my first Discworld book.
Oh, well, welcome to the world. I'm of the personal opinion that Guards is the best introduction book to Discworld. The Color of Magic is the first actual book in the series, and it kind of establishes things like there's a point where they mention like octarine glow on some of the lamps around the Unseen University. Octarine is the color of magic. But there's universe explanation stuff that happens in Color of Magic that you don't get almost anywhere else. But because it's the first book in the series, because it's early Terry Pratchett work, he hasn't really gotten his feet under him yet. And so it's like it's not nearly as delightful a read as something like Guards, which does a good job of not only establishing like here's the world and how it functions, because I think Guards is the first book that really explores Ankh-Morpork as a city.
Yes, it's the first one that really highlights that city.
Yeah. Like everything else is very like there's like a couple of I'm trying to remember what exactly comes before Guards. I know Color of Magic is 1. Guards is like number 4. The Light Fantastic, Equal Rights. I'm just looking at the front of the book. Light Fantastic, Equal Rights. Oh my gosh. This is like book 7?
There's a lot of travel.
What?
This is book number 8.
What?
But the first ones, there was a lot of traveling around. I know, like, didn't they go over the side of the water, and then they're traveling and doing quests, and they're trying to get to Ankh-Morpork, but they didn't spend time sort of going into how the society works and the patrician and the whole.
Right. And I think Equal Rights and Weird Sisters, which are both before Guards, aren't even in Ankh-Morpork at all at any point in time. There's a lot of like world establishment and exploration before Guards.
I think some of them, they ended up coming to Ankh-Morpork, and then they go to Unseen University, and then the action actually takes place there, right. Which is sort of discreet and it doesn't really intersect so much with the rest of the city.
Yeah.
I'm going to need a list of the top 5 Discworld books to read, and I'll start there and then just like wait on in.
I think topic of much debate, I'm sure.
I'm certain it's a topic of much debate. I think Lost Limey and I are probably the ones who are the deepest in book club into the Terry Pratchett fan base. Lost Limey far exceeds my own, of course, to the point where there was I can't remember what I was talking about, but I was like, didn't Terry Pratchett have some kind of problem with this? And he really didn't like that. And Lost Limey jumps in and is like, here's exactly the situation. I know precisely what was going on there. And I was like, I'm glad you did, because I was half lost. It's, just real quick chat. Let's see. Fofacy says one of our teams, this is for Gishwis, 3D printed the Squoose mascot from this past year. Lost Limey jumps in and says Sir Terry rules. Glaucon says this is his first Discworld as well. Breckett read Color of Magic years ago, and while he liked it, he wasn't really motivated to continue this series. He read this one and immediately ordered the next 2 in the Watch series. Lost Limey says, I did start with the Color of Magic and the Light Fantastic. They're definitely more parody/pastiche than the more satirical edge. Guards is number 8. See, like, I had to look at the front of the book to have any clue where Guards fell, because I thought it was like number 4 or 5, and I was like way off.
And it may be in the timeline because he didn't write chronologically.
This is true.
So my best friend in the world that I met in my sophomore year in college, he's one of her favorite authors. And she says, you don't have to read them in order like you do some because they crisscross. She said the thing to do is to find something that you're interested in. So the first one that she picked up was Small Gods, and it was all about little sects of religion, and it discussed a lot about religion and belief and people and philosophy. And for her, that was just a perfect gateway. The first one I read was Going Postal, which was sort of a satire about the building of the internet. And I used to work at an ISP back when we were building the internet, and so it was just the perfect introduction. So I think your favorite books, in a sense, are personal to what interests you have, and that's probably a good place to start, is just sort of read some synopses and find a theme that speaks to you and start there.
Yeah, I think that's solid
Good
advice.
and valuable feedback, and I will be getting more Terry Pratchett books.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Lost Limey says that Pratchett in later years recommended starting with Mort, Book 4, and Death, Book 1.
I love Mort.
Mort, Mort is choice.
And the thing is one of the nice things is that once he establishes the characters, then they pop up and do little cameos. So it's like getting an unexpected visit from a friend when you read a new book. And because Mort and Death intersect in so many, and because he was an early character, he pops up a lot. So he was in this book, and you can tell because the type changes. So as soon as you start seeing all capitals, it's like, hey, wait a minute, that's him blending in.
All capitals and that distinctly serif font.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I love Death. Death is easily my favorite, like my second favorite character from the entire series, because Vetinari is my favorite.
He's pretty awesome. Yeah.
As cynical as he is.
I like reading this book. I was like, I need to know more about him and how he sees the world. I was very intrigued.
I'm trying to remember what the book is that is distinctly Vetinari like focused. There's one though where you are quite literally following Vetinari through the entire book. Only occasionally, it's kind of like how Guards follows Sam Vimes,
right.
where like occasionally you'll glance off into other parts of Ankh-Morpork and other things that are going on, but most of the time you're inside Sam Vimes' head. There is a book that is like that for Vetinari, and I can't recall the title off the top of my head, but hopefully Lost Limey will help me out with that.
I haven't read that one yet. That sounds good.
He ends up traveling to the Discworld equivalent of Romania and hanging out with a vampire queen, basically. And they're all very like, you're not up. Do you drink? Do you? And like they just like kind of skip around it, like very.
And he gives them that blank look, right?
Right, and that's she's like, me. That's what could we possibly be talking about? I don't know. I don't understand. And she of course assumes that he is a vampire because of his general mannerisms and who he is as a person, and it's magnificent, and I love it, and I cannot recall the title of it right now, but I might look in the book a little bit later.
Maybe we'll drop it into the chat later.
Yeah. Glocken says, I love the Patrician as a character. Fofasi says, he's a magnificent font of information. Lost Limey says, I think moving pictures is where the Unseen University faculty starts to get to their own and become recurring. Lost Limey says, Small Gods is great, one of the few standalone ones, also often recommended as the best single Discworld novel among the fandom. I think that's fair. If you're going to only read one Discworld novel, like if it was like you have to have just one, you're not allowed to read any of the others to continue the series. I think
I don't want to live in that world. I'm sorry, that's not okay.
I think Small Gods is probably the best standalone. But I personally am so about the Night Watch, not just because I think Sam Vimes and Carrot and Colin and Nabi and some of the other characters that come along a little later, not just because I think they're all magnificent, but because the Night Watch tales also tend to feature Vetinari pretty prominently, because being the person who's running the city, they tend to go to him to be like, hey, we're trying to fix this. Or he tends to pull them into his office like he did with Sam Vimes early in this one to be like, I trust you're investigating this. The waiting bird, sir, you know what I mean. Let's see. Lost Limey. Death cameos in every single Discworld book, aside from one of the Tiffany Aching. And I think Jingo has a lot of Veterinary. I can't. Jingo's one of the ones that I think I must have read while I was sick or something, because my recollection of it is not very strong, which is rare for Pratchett books.
Right. So now you get to read it again almost like it's fresh. So
Almost-
that's sort of a gift.
Almost brand new. Exactly.
Yeah.
So exploring the world of Discworld, the beauty of it is that there's so much to get into. There's so many different directions you can go and find things. I personally am, of course, huge on the Night Watch, but I particularly enjoy when we were talking earlier about like characters will make cameos in other books. I particularly enjoy when the focus of another book is a different character, and then one of your more familiar, more beloved characters shows up in that book. So Going Postal is one that I read very late into my Discworld time. And so I was already very familiar with Sam Vimes and The Watch. And Moist von Lipwig, for those of you who have not read that yet, is established very early to be a kind of a scam artist. And so when Sam Vimes shows up on his doorstep, the first thing is, oh God, I'm going to get nicked. And the second thing is, oh, I hate these guys and their shiny breastplates and their everything by the book attitude. And it's like to see Sam Vimes, who is one of my most beloved characters, just be raked over the coals. It's so magnificent.
It's so interesting because Going Postal is one of like the 3 that I've read. And so I only knew Vimes through that book. And so getting to see him, I mean, that was years and years and years ago. So it's like kind of fuzzy, but getting to see him being like a little bit of a hot mess in this one was very different from my recollections.
Hot mess. A dragon. Ah!
But I think that's one of the things that Pratchett does really well is give things from different perspectives, either one character in a different situation or a different age in a different perspective, or just pulling. He's really wonderful. And you talk about the patrician. Well, that's essentially a mouthpiece for him to talk. And I think he's just genius at it. I wikied it just to see what it said. And it was talking about the reception and how some people were upset when he came out with Guards because they felt like he was going to ruin the comedy of Discworld with the social commentary that he was mixing in. That this was the first one he really started mixing in it's almost like he poured Jonathan Swift into a fantasy, right? And some of the critics were really unhappy about it, but I thought it was where the genius of Pratchett really began to shine. Like he got his feet 8 books in and really started to let that come in. So it's one of my faves.
I feel like, if I recall correctly, Pyramids also had a fair amount of social commentary and satire in it, but he was a lot more subtle about it. Where in Guards, he's basically just like hitting you in the face with his book constantly, being like, hey, society is a messed up place, just by the way.
I think, well, and Hogsfather, the whole Hogsfather, was commercial, religious, holiday commentary. And so I don't know if any of you have seen the miniseries that they did, probably Netflix. So it's BBC, and they've got one for Hogsfather and they've got one for Going Postal that I thought they did an exceptionally good job being extremely faithful to Pratchett. And so I don't mind recommending those, whereas some of the other ones, they wander.
I've heard of all of these, and I've heard that they're all magnificent, and I've yet to watch any of them, which is probably a disservice to myself as a Pratchett fanboy.
Well, when you have that time off and the holidays and you want to just be indulgent for yourself and just so like you can read like Hallmark novels, right? Whatever it is that's going to soothe your head from 2020, I highly recommend it. The Going Postal one, the one that plays the sort of goth lady in it is the one that plays the young Queen Elizabeth in The Crown. I don't remember her, the actress, but she does a fantastic job, better than I would have been able to imagine anyone else doing. I was really impressed.
Lost Limey is all up in chat right now. Says the patrician is a big presence in the Moist Von Liquid subseries. Vimes isn't really Vimes until the next Night Watch book, in his opinion. Asks, did the critics not notice Granny Weatherwax's secular humanism and satire in Equal Rights? Points
Apparently
out
not.
that the Color of Magic adaptation, the series they did for that, is badly miscast. And then asks if the actress you're talking about is Claire Foy.
Yes, that's it. And I thought she did a really good job, because that was a convoluted character. lot of different prickly points on that one, right? Emotions just chasing across. She did a good job.
The city really seemed to be like a very present character in the novel, and I love when that's a thing that like authors do. Like it even like that's like the introduction into like the first couple of pages where you meet Vimes. He's like, oh, the city is a woman. It's gonna like kick you when you're down or something. And I really enjoyed how like irreverent and like capitalist and opportunistic like the city was. Like any conqueror that comes in is just gonna be welcomed and we'll pretend it was our idea in the first place, kind of a thing. I really enjoyed that. I don't know, what was y'all's take?
I liked it too. I also liked how it was like always described as kind of gross, like talking about the river and like you don't even need to like you could get the water out of the river with a net. Like it was like, oh, gross. It was a lot of very good descriptions of the city that I enjoyed.
I like that one when they were talking about how some lucky rain used to fall out on the green fields or on the sheep, but some of it fell into Ankh-Morpork, and that was not so lucky.
So sad.
Yeah, the way he describes Ankh-Morpork, and anytime Pratchett sets a story in Ankh-Morpork, he spends a little bit of time at the top just talking about what an absolutely filthy place it is. Particularly when he's doing either the Patrician or the Night Watch, he'll just talk about like the slow moving river and how like if you were particularly quick footed, you could walk across it. But heaven forbid you stop because you'll sink in and you won't be getting back out. I think there was a
joke like that about the wading birds and like being able to walk across.
I love it. I love it so much. And Ankh-Morpork is very much a character in of itself. I particularly like when Pratchett's talking about like there are sections of Ankh-Morpork that reflect other cities. Like every city has its own the Shades. But Ankh-Morpork itself basically is most cities the Shades, so their version of that is twice as bad, to the point where even thieves don't walk down certain alleys if they want to walk back out.
I liked it when he was describing the bar that they were in and that the smoke was coming up but didn't seem to want to touch the walls, so it just hung.
I have been in a couple of like dive bars where that was kind of the vibe.
I'm shocked.
Where it's like you walk in and you're like, a whole lot of smoke in the air. And like the walls look like they're not taking any of it, probably because they've had their fill for a while now.
It's a slippery residue.
Oh, I would love to go to one of those bars right about now.
You know, I think that's like some like Cheetos or something like that, where the thought of Cheetos is just like, oh man, I couldn't eat just one Cheeto. I'd have to have a bunch. Ooh, wouldn't that be nice? And then you actually eat one and you're kind of like, oh, this wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I think if we went to that bar now, that's how we would feel.
I mean, I don't know if I was like this bar is a COVID safe area, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's go hang out.
Yeah.
I'm probably not gonna stay long, but like, hell yeah. Um, real
Uh,
quick, Skyrim Thief says, I love your sweaters. And Fofacy says same. And then Lost Limey says, the big wahoonie. I mean, is that a reference to Ankh Morpork? Am I missing a reference to Ankh Morpork right now? Um, real quick, on the topic of Ankh Morpork, it is a blend of like 4 different cities in Pratchett's mind, and one of those is Venice.
Hmm.
And
You know
which
what?
thinking about veterinary and some of the, I could
That
see
makes sense with some of the guilds and all of the like power that they hold. That feels very Venice.
infighting and
Yeah.
it's also, I thought one of the most interesting things about Ankh Morpork is that part of the reason it's such a like greasy city is because it's built on marsh. Like the whole thing, they talk about it a couple of times where they're like, well, we're all on loam here, so there's no big rocks. Because they're talking about late in the book when they're chaining up Lady Sybil Ramkin.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder where they got that big rock from. They would have had to have it imported.
It makes sense with all of the little swamp dragons.
I loved her as a character. I thought she was
yeah.
fabulous. Every scene Lady Ramkin was in, I was like,
She was a scene stealer, wasn't she?
she was.
It didn't matter who was in there with her, she was doing it. And I love, there was one of them where Nobby said something really just like inappropriate to her, and she gave like the steely gaze of an upper class woman who was going to steadfastly refuse to acknowledge that she understood what was said, and just looked, and it's like, I've done that so much. That was that was a perfect description.
I believe Nabi said something to the effect of, and if need be, we'll kick him in the bullocks. And she just
He
like,
said a lot of stuff. I don't
she
remember
just like
which one it was, but
laser eyes into him and is like, I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Just amazing character. Not something I enjoy in this book is how she starts out very subtly flirting with Sam Vimes and then realizes that he is a total clod, and just like slowly more and more just like starts like bludgeoning him with compliments and things, to the point where he starts getting all flustered near the end of the book. I love it. It's so good.
and those two, like at the beginning, appear to have nothing in common at all. But as they keep going through this stuff, you find that they actually have more and more in common. And one of the things that struck me was he sort of took the little dragon, whose name is escaping me, as
Errol.
like a favor to her because he couldn't figure any other way out of it. And I was thinking about Tolkien, and he was talking about how it isn't just the big people that drive the stories and that save the day. It's the little people every time. So that happens in Lord of the Ring. I guess I can do spoilers for that one, right?
It
happens in that one.
for a while.
If they're not nice to him going over through Mordor, then he wouldn't be able to come and bite his finger off and it goes into the volcano. If they had killed him earlier on, none of that would have worked. So that kindness coming out of the hobbits on the way there is really one of the things that saved the day. And I feel like Vimes's kindness to the little dragon and incorporating him allowed him to sort of grow as a character. So he was the one that actually saved him from the big bad, takeover dragon that was flaming everybody in the streets. So I saw a little echo throw over to Tolkien there too.
I also thought it was very interesting that Sam Vimes, who's described as a very stringy sort of character, like well enough built, but like kind of lean, is then described as like when you, from Sam Vimes' perspective, start talking about Sybil Ramkin, and like there is clear and defined awe in the way Sybil Ramkin is described every time Sam Vimes is thinking about her at all. And then to have kind of the like parallel of Sam Vimes and Lady Ramkin, who is like, he is a relatively small dude, and she is a very like powerful, towering woman. And then Errol and the dragon, where
Yes.
he is a very small dude and she is a very large and powerful woman.
When I realized that they were making that joke, I lost it. I thought it was so funny and charming, and like, when I think it was Nabi makes some comments about it.
Is Nabi not wonderful? I mean, you think about like protagonists that are not strict heroes, like Nabi's just amazing.
I feel like I've played D&D with that rogue, you know?
Yes. I tried the handle to make sure it was locked, and since it wasn't, I went in to check it out. Yeah.
I wanted to make sure nothing had been stolen. And I helped myself to a roll on the way out.
I loved it when Carrot like cleaned out that bar and the doorman, who was a rock guy, was laying down, and Hubby comes up and kicks him in the nuts and hurts his foot because they were made of stone. But that whole concept of kicking them while they were down, finally, ow, you know, he got a quick karma on that one.
There's so many things to enjoy, and it's hard to narrow down like what my favorite part of Discworld is, because there are so many things about Discworld that I love. But in this book in particular, I think it's got to be like Vetinari down in the dungeons talking about, like, you know, if you're going to build dungeons, you need to build dungeons you wouldn't mind spending some time in yourself, because odds are good you'll wind up there at some point.
Loved it.
And then
he's got the lock on the inside of the door so he can lock the guards out. Just classic.
And then on top of that, he's got the he's talking about, you know, if your leader is all about like bunkers and secret tunnels and ways to get out, you can tell their heart's not in it.
They're not in it for the long haul. Yeah. I really like those little bits too.
It's just like those little moments. What were some of y'all's favorite, like, what would you say is one of, if not your favorite section, just off the dome?
This isn't like a scene in the book, but I really liked Carrot's letters home, and I liked Vime's notes to himself. I liked both of those like little extra bits.
His little,
so lovely.
His little detective notes, like, where did it go?
No, where did it come from? Where did it go? And I'm like, Cotton Eye Joe, what?
I liked, you know, the brotherhood that was summoning the dragon, and they all had a beef, like with somebody who disrespected them at this shop, or did like little things that made them feel small. And then they felt like the government wasn't adequately taking care of them because these things were happening, and they sort of nursed that petty grievance. And then the dragon comes, and those are the places that got flamed. And they're looking at like, what was the thing that all these had in common? And there wasn't anything, because it was these little teeny petty grievances from these doofus guys in the brotherhood. And I just thought, if you take that and magnify it out, what social commentary you have there. And maybe 2020, maybe that's a particularly powerful social commentary, and we have to think that Pratchett was a little prescient on this stuff.
Yeah, I was like unhappily unfamiliar with like the mindset of those guys. It was like, oh, these guys, what ruiners. Yeah.
I don't know. I've kind of already said it, but I don't think I can pick all of the scenes with Lady Ramkin, but like,
why not? Pick them.
Do it.
She was like my favorite.
It's awesome.
I thought every time she like whipped the guards into shape, or like intimidated people, or like flirted with Vimes, or how he like thought about her. There was this one, there were so many good like quotes and like turns of phrase like about her that I just found really charming. I mean, Terry Pratchett's like endlessly quotable, so.
But very, in spite of her being so formidable and all this going on, she was very delicately drawn in terms of language. It was a very light touch for her character. And I thought that's how she was able to shine through so nicely.
I liked one of the descriptions where she was like dressed up fancy and was like called a glittering siege engine. Like, yeah.
For the ceremony, right? Yeah.
Or
yeah, there the coronation or something. Just like,
Or the I'm trying to remember what happens. Oh, it's when the angry mob comes to attack her dragons because there's a dragon causing problems.
Right.
And it's like she drew herself up like a reverse continental drift.
Yes.
All the islands and continents coming together to form one massive proto woman. And I'm like, that is so evocative. Like it not only gives you a sense of scale for this person, but also a sense of like how intimidating that would be.
You know, I think I've done that also. It's it's very effective, right?
That scene was great, and I can't remember if it was Lady Ramkin or if it was Vimes, but they put out a collection and they charged the people.
Oh, she was doing it, yeah.
That was after chat is, let's see, just real quick. The Sybil is very robust, is what Last Limey says. And then talking about Venonari being in the dungeon is like, yes, that stuff is the funniest section of the book, even if the rats can't read the labels.
Yes. They bring the wine, right? And he just, yeah.
The very spectacular brown sauce. Breckett says, Carrot almost attempting to arrest Venonari was great. Lost Limey says, the password bit with the Eldritch Doors at the start is fun, and apparently doing that password bit was a favorite part of the stage adaptation. And then Breckett talking about the scene we're in, where we're talking about, her drawing herself up to be like, what do you people think you're doing? Vimes scaring off the mob from Ramkin's estate by brandishing a swamp dragon like a gun. And Lost Limey is like, that's a great Clint Eastwood bit.
Yeah.
The question is, do you feel lucky, punk?
Is there another flame left in there? Honestly, I don't know. Yeah, that was great.
That scene was fantastic.
I'm trying to remember the over the initial watch house. There's a thing in Latin-ish that is not actual Latin, but it's something to the effect of it's like a Clint Eastwood-ism near the beginning, and I cannot recall it off the top of my head, but I might be able to find it if I go looking.
So that's like that French thing that I was trying, that wasn't really French, but it was Pratchett French.
Well, what he did was he took the words and he was like, what would it sound like if someone
Cockney English, yeah.
Right. What if they read this out loud as if it were Cockney English? Lost Limey found it. It's fabricati firmus, punk, which is make my day. Fabricati DM, punk. Apologies.
Oh, that's awesome.
Make my day.
There was one in there too where Carrot was talking in Dwarvish, and he said like something sunshine, and the literal translation was like, oh, fiery orb with the major eye that shines at the end of the, it was like this whole long thing, and I was just like, such Dwarvish poetry must be amazing.
It's not really well established in Guards, but in later books it is established that dwarves see words as almost holy. And so it's a great honor to be someone who can do things like erase words.
Ooh. Because
that's something that typically like the dwarven equivalent of a shaman might do. And so Dwarven being established very early as this just like really beautiful language that's very poetic. It makes a ton of sense. And I think even in Guards, Pratchett's like, well, dwarves, the way dwarves talk is, of course, going to be very flowery and beautiful because words are one of the few things they have when it's pitch black in the mines.
And they haven't gone to the city and had the drinks yet.
But also apparently have trouble with metaphor.
Right. Yes. Well, because metaphor is like gentle lying, right? Like it's you're not
like,
quite saying what you mean, friend.
I liked that part in one of Carrot's letters where he's like, a metaphor, which I think is a softer form of lying or something. It's just like, aw.
So if you think about like Elf and the way he came with his literal frame of mind in, and it's similar to the way that Carrot came in, and he's living at the whorehouse and he doesn't understand that it's a whorehouse. They keep waking him up and asking him if he wants anything, and he's like, no, I'm fine.
I asked, but they did not have any apples, so I went back to sleep.
Thanks, Carrot. I enjoyed him as like a foil and a source of like a lot of, I think, comedy throughout, especially in the beginning before like the plot starts to pick up and stuff. I feel like it really helped.
It's so nice to see the tropes just turned upside down or sideways, or I don't know what he did to the tropes, but they're definitely askew. And thinking about like the young hero that's going to come in with the sword and he's got the birthmark in the shape of the crown, and then it's Carrot.
And then right at the end of the book, Vetinari is looking at the sword and he's like,
yeah.
And he knows, yeah.
Where did you say you got this sword from? Well, he's a good boy. Send him on his way and make sure he's well taken care of.
And all you want to do is be in the guards, right? Yes, sir. Yeah, it was.
Oh, fine.
Yeah, I like that little like nugget.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the way Pratchett world builds is so magnificent. Because there's all these little ways in which things tie together, and Vetinari is the kind of person who doesn't. He expresses regret. Excuse me, gracious. He expresses regret over once falling into the pit because he's like, oh, but he was so useful though. And that is a running trend in these books, is that Vetinari can find a use for nearly anyone in nearly any situation. And he even expresses that he likes having people who are trying to get his job or trying to kill him, because he's like, it keeps me sharp and it keeps me, engaged in the world and how things are going around me.
But when he finds use, it's always convoluted. And the person usually has no idea how they're going to be a use actually. Wonderful. Somebody brought up in the channel about how there's no chapters, and I never noticed that, and it's absolutely true. And I have ADHD, and I was like, yeah, it just rolls, but way better, way more exciting than James Joyce. Just
yeah, I was reading it and I was like, oh, I'll stop at the next chapter break. And there was no chapter break. And I was like, that can't be true. And I like flipped through the book and I was like, what? I don't know that I've ever read another book with no chapter breaks. And after I realized I was probably like 150 pages in or something, it like, I don't know if I liked it or not. Like I was very aware of it for the rest of the book.
I was very unaware of it until you just said it.
Totally, yeah.
And now I'm like, oh my God.
But if you think about like people that do things that are task oriented and they stop when the task is completed, or if they're time oriented and they look and they're going to do it for another 15 minutes, he's just sort of doing things differently, like Pratchett, right? And it's nice.
The thing you kind of get used to when reading a Pratchett book is noticing a scene change. And just popping your bookmark there and being like, all right, that's chapter enough, I guess.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what it lends to the narrative, because it's like it's clearly a conscious choice to not have chapters. and it's pretty unique. So like, why? And the only thing that comes to mind is that it offers less structure, and maybe he wanted more of like a mashed together kind of like free flowing narrative rather than something like linear structured.
A waterfall of events that were all happening, and so like you're like going along with vibes, and then you're with Carrot, and then you're seeing some like the brethren or whatever, and like I guess it was a short time span of events too, only just like a couple days.
Yeah, definitely. Like, well,
the dragon part, like it started much earlier, but then once the dragon shows up, it's only around for like a couple days, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure how long Carrot spends on the Force before the dragon shows up, but
yeah,
maybe a week at most, right?
It's not long.
Very long, yeah.
I might go with a week.
Mm-hmm.
So indeed, time is very fluid with this because some things are expanded and there's a lot of things that are happening concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I guess he's asking us to make a choice when we're going to take a break and how we're going to use the narrative and not making it artificially compartmentalized with labels on them, which is I really appreciated that thought.
My understanding of this, and Lost Limey can either back me up or correct me, whichever is the more appropriate thing to do, is that Terry Pratchett's writing style was such that he got tired of reformatting chapters every time he had to go back and add things.
Sounds like him, yes.
And his editor was very cross with him because he would submit partial pages in the middle of where like a chapter break would be, because he had thoughts about things he wanted to add or change to pages that had already been submitted ages past. And the editor's like, you can't keep doing this. I've already established how the chapter is going to be set. And so Mr. Pratchett was like, what if we did no chapters? And then you don't have to worry about that. We just have to get the words in order.
And being able to mix and match things around, since the timeline was fluid anyway, there were, that makes total sense. And it sounds Pratchettish.
Very good sense for all those poor editors out there who have to dump giant text documents into editing programs.
When word processing became a thing, like on computers, it is my understanding that Terry Pratchett was one of the first writers to be like, yes, 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 yes. This is going to make life so much easier. Lost Limey said that's entirely correct, but I don't know how long ago Lost Limey said that because I wasn't watching closely enough.
Oh.
So it's possible that not all of what I said was entirely correct, but at least part of it was. Yeah.
Well, we'll leave it to his responsibility to come back and rebut that.
It's hard to wrap my brain around being an author, especially such a prolific author, before there was word processing programs like computers.
I mean, I
That's
think
wild.
I think his first couple of books were released in the early 80s. So word processing programs would have existed, but just barely, kind of deal.
Word Perfect 1.0 and
Okay.
but and I was thinking there were word processing typewriters too, where you'd type and it would carry like 2 or 3 lines. Because I used to do this in college. People would make me type stuff because I learned how to type on a Selectric. Had the little ball that would go and you could pop it out and do different fonts. So I think sometimes they were recording and then they'd have somebody type it out, or there were lots of different ways to do it. But word processing has certainly probably freed up the mechanics of actually writing to the point that there's an opportunity cost for that they could use that brain power on the story and the characters and things. So we're probably seeing a lot better fiction because of that.
I think that's fair. Because I've known a couple of people who write, and they certainly seem to appreciate the opportunity to go back and insert things in the middle of places without worrying about like, oh, this is going to ruin everything.
Well, and if you think about like continuity checks, if you wanted to do Control F and look for every time you mentioned whatever it was, it's got to be just a
Oh
godsend.
Lord, if you want to change the name of something, I don't know if any of you caught that, by the way, but I noticed something. I'm suspecting it got edited when it came to the US, but they missed one. So Nabi has these cigarettes, and the cigarettes somehow they end up behind his ear and almost instantly become dog end cigarettes.
Right. Yeah.
Well, they used the British word for cigarette the very first time and no time after that.
Oh, so
And
it was like a
since-
localization, and then they.
I
nice.
think that's what that was, because I only saw it once and I was like, well, I'm surprised to see that in here. And then I was like, oh, right, Britain. Never mind. I'm not thinking about the fact that Terry Pratchett is a British writer. And then I was like, I wonder. And then next time I saw it was a dog end, and from then on it was dog end, and I was like,
Related to book things in this book, I really enjoyed L-Space and the library descriptions, and also the librarian. Like,
fantastic.
I love it. What other books have like L-Space? I want to read those ones.
The part where they had the some sort of a creature that was going through and eating these big volumes, and then like putting out slim little volumes of criticism.
And there's a little thesaurus and like all of these other little creatures that live amongst the books, and
I loved it.
That whole thing.
I liked how over the course of the book, the librarian became more in like it seemed like both we and the other characters could understand him better and better.
Mm-hmm.
Like by the end of the book, he's having like almost conversations with like Vimes and stuff, where at the beginning, I don't know, maybe because we're getting more of Carrot's perspective, but like
I felt like that was the case, was Carrot had no idea how to talk to the librarian because Carrot had never interacted with the librarian before, where Vimes clearly had interacted with the librarian, and probably frequently, as both of them spend time in bars.
The part where he was playing charades to get the name of the book it was perfect. And there was one of those descriptions about how he was drinking and about how he stuck his tongue in like a vortex, and it sounded like a canal being drained when he was drinking his beer. And I'm just, what great descriptions. That was so evocative.
Some of Terry Pratchett's metaphor is just so magnificent.
I liked all of the dragon descriptions too, of like how it sounded when it moved and how it looked when it moved. Oh, and I really liked, it was just like one of the times when they were looking for the dragon and waiting for the dragon, and they're like looking at the tower, and Vimes is like, what does that look like to you guys? And they're like, like a dragon, but maybe it's not. It's probably not. And then they're like, it's moving. Oh, okay. It was just so good.
There is this is more of a David Wong-ism, but Terry Pratchett gets into it a little bit as well. There is a character in some of the other Discworld, specifically Ink-Morpork books, that is a dog that talks. And people just disregard anything the talking dog says unless someone else is there to have potentially been talking to them, because dogs don't talk. So that I can't possibly have heard a dog talk just now, because they don't do that.
And they're so used to just disregarding stuff because there's so many weird things going on. They just,
And so like that scene in Guards where it's like, well, that couldn't be a dragon. That's got to be something like a tower, possibly, or I don't recall that roof having one of those. And this is direct line of sight from the watch house. You'd think we know what that roof looks like. well, you know, things change. Like,
That was when they were talking about the odds too. If it was a 1 in a million chance, then they might actually do it. But if it was 999,999, well, no, that's not going to happen. And then they're trying to do the math, and I'm just like,
them.
just like in probability drive. Wah, wah. It was. I love that part.
That was great.
Any nice little nuggets.
Jumping back into chat, Glocken says Carrot is adorable, and then is talking about I love how the brothel all loves him because he's so earnest and honest. And Lost Limey says the Seamstresses Guild, and then Lost Limey says apparently based on a real life euphemism for Seattle's red light district, where the ladies of negotiable affection were recorded as seamstresses in the census. So there's a fun fact for trivia night. And then Breckett says, yeah, I probably noticed the lack of chapters between page 100 and 200 as well, which is frankly kind of impressive because it's a 400-page book total, which means that for those of us who were unfamiliar with Terry Pratchett's, because I don't know at what point I noticed, it was so long ago. For those of us new to the world of Pratchett, you could easily get through almost half the book before you're like, wait a minute. And then it that almost raises the question of like, have chapters been providing us a lot of useful structure this whole time, or are they just something that we expect to be there because they always have been?
So maybe they provided something useful in the past that's no longer as applicable.
I mean, I think chapters still apply in modern books. I think it's an excellent way to display a change in scene, or especially a change in time. Pratchett just does all of those things differently from your typical book. And I think that's a flavor thing, because I think some people are going to find that they distinctly do not like that because they are more structured individuals. I personally like it, but I also don't mind chapters. So it's not like I'm like, well, obviously Terry has it right and everybody else should get on his level. Because chapters are useful and chapters are nice to have. I just don't mind them being completely missing in cards and the like. Lost Limey says it's slightly more noticeable in Reaper Man, where the two main subplots are set in slightly different typefaces. Reaper Man, if you hadn't already guessed, is a death novel. And all of Death's text, including like inside the head and noticing things, is all done in that same typeface. And so it's all like a strong serif font with like very like clear cut letter. I think it might even be in all caps.
So when you read his part in your head, does it sound different? Because I hear him in a different voice in my head when I read that type than I do the other.
For me, he's very Ghost of Christmas Future. Ebenezer Scrooge. Just the really deep, like bone reverberating voice. Like that's how I hear Death when I read anything that has Death's particular font choice on it.
Without knowing that character was Death when I was reading this, and I was like, is this the dragon? I don't know. And then after through that scene, I forgot about it. But now knowing that it's Death, I can also say that reading that font also caused that voice in my head, like a very deep bone shaking voice. That's what that font reads to me.
It's a really gothic style font. Let's see. Lost Limey says, I think the YA ones have chapters and the Moist books have Dickensian in which X happens chapter titles. Let's see. Fofesi says, I'm not sure why he's not on video, to be honest, because since Pratchett is his favorite author, lol. As far as like who to invite, I usually pick, if we're going to do a audience step on, I usually pick whoever has been most excitedly talking about the book, unless that person has gone recently. Since it's been a while since we had any guest spots at all, and Tree had been blowing up chat. That's Tree. That's why I brought you on, is because you were very excited and were taking lots of notes. And I was like, Tree is going to have a lot to say. I can tell.
It will happen repeatedly, so you can let Craig go next time because
The
I'm likely to be rampant.
the beauty of Discworld is that I would feel fine suggesting other Discworld novels because they are not necessarily continuations of the same story. We could very easily go into something like Equal Rights, which is about a whole other subset of characters, and not break our no sequels rule. Since it's kind of like they're all set in the same world, but they're completely different characters a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Lost Slimy says he, talking about Terry Pratchett, became a lot more prolific in the 1990s. I think he published 5 novels in 1990, 2 of which were Discworld. The Color of Magic was 1984, and I think The Carpet People was 1978, but he rewrote it in 1992, and it feels a lot more contemporary Pratchett with the rewrite. Lost Slimy's copy is the British one, and they use Dog End in that one. And he says he'll have to reread to double check.
89.
So maybe that was an original edit that didn't make it. I could see that trying to be Pratchett's editor, you know, that would be like a Herculean clean out the stables sort of a task.
Fofacy wonders if the use of Dog End was a calculated literary maneuver to suddenly get people to start moving past the use of the pejorative word, but hasn't read Pratchett outside of Good Omens, so doesn't know how well that theory tracks.
So this was 89. Maybe.
I mean, Pratchett, I don't think Pratchett has a whole lot of preconceived notions about things like people of different upbringings and cultures. Some of that will come through in books that explore other cultures, because Pratchett is not content to make commentary on American and British lifestyle, but ranges wide and varied. But I haven't found anything that I would say seems very troubling. Let's see. The odds talks were amazing, says Glaucon. And Lost Limey says that's an actual game mechanic in GURPS Discworld. 1,000,000 to 1 shot succeeds 9 times out of 10.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh, I love that so much. Breckett says the fact it took me that long to notice does raise the questions if chapters actually cause me to stop where I otherwise might keep reading. Which Glaucon is like, that's a good point. I think that's fair because I will very frequently be like, well, I'm close to the chapter end, so I'm going to push on for 3 more pages. Or sometimes I'll be like, well, it's pretty late. I just finished the chapter. I probably shouldn't start another one.
Yeah. A lot of times it's exactly that. Like I'll like, oh, I've only got 5 more pages in this chapter. Let's finish it out as like a clean stopping point. And then other times it's not gonna keep going because I just finished the chapter.
Right.
I think so many times I stop because something makes me stop. So, and of course I'm kind of scattery anyway. So I just tend to always have several bookmarks that I cram in, and you find receipts. One time I picked up a Tom Robbins novel and I found a receipt where I had bought it at the airport like 15 years before. It still had the receipt in it that I've been using as a bookmark. So I think I don't pay attention to chapters.
I'm not going to lie. If I don't have a hardcover, I will absolutely use a receipt as my bookmark. And in fact, since I've been getting books from Alpha Comics, that's almost exclusively what I've been doing if I don't have a hardcover. So I have Guards had the receipt from where I bought the book from Alpha. that just in it the whole time I was reading it, basically.
Yep. That's I would say 8 times out of 10, that's my bookmark. It's either a receipt or a Post-it note. An old one from work that I don't need anymore.
Fair. Lost Limey hears death as Christopher Lee because Christopher Lee did the voice for the Soul Music cartoon.
I can see that.
I think Christopher Lee's just a great voice to have for your personification of death in your mind anyway.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee's got a great voice for just that. All right. Is there anything in particular that we'd like to get into in Guards that we haven't gotten to yet before we jump into talking a little bit about To Be Taught If Fortunate? And chat, this goes for you as well. I mean, I could wax poetic about this and many other books for a very long time, but you know.
I don't know. I think we hit like all of my favorite things.
I thought the whole mechanic where they were talking about the ruling and how to control the people was explored on multiple levels. So there was the one who was sort of controlling and manipulating the Brotherhood by using certain things, and then the patrician had one way, and then they discussed about how kings would be and how they would be with it, and then the dragon came in, and the whole idea that you would that humans would be willing to give up their rights for structure, and that they would be willing to let a certain number of people get flamed as a sacrifice if everybody else was okay. And I thought the way that was all handled was rather chilling, and some of the things that it said about human nature and political systems could not have been said anywhere except a fantasy novel. But because he was able to put it in Ankh-Morpork, he was able to cover things that maybe we need to be thinking about, but we wouldn't have been able to handle in a contemporary novel.
That reminds me of the description of Lady Ramkin's room, and like how it's very like kind of recognizable and that sort of thing, but then also it's like this room will make you sad when you think about it, because of like all of the pamphlets of like, you know, the letters that she's writing, trying to like, you know, help with various dragon causes and things. And yeah, it's just kind of like the world.
Yeah, I did think it was kind of like the way Vimes describes Sybil's room is very much a like, you can tell that this is a space that is mostly utilitarian for her herself, but then also you can see kind of the demonstration of the amount of help she wants to give and the amount of help that she's capable of giving. And you can see just like that crack at the edge where she can't give more but wants to. I am reminded briefly of the satirical viral video about how you can't hug every cat. And it's like, I think that's very much who Sybil is as a person, is just like she wants to help every swamp dragon, but also knows that she can't help every swamp dragon. And so she does what she can to advocate for them and help other people help swamp dragons. If it's any comfort to us on that, in later books she has established essentially a shelter, a rescue operation, and has an entire staff and does fundraiser dinners and things like that for it. It's
Isn't she fabulous?
Oh, it's so magnificent. Lost Slimy pointed out that we have not even touched on Cut My Own Throat Dibbler. the street vendor.
He reoccurs too.
He is a consistently reoccurring character.
Yeah.
It ends with the monks sending the shipment down. so funny. So, that was such a wonderful, like, little snarky bit to end with. Loved it.
Yeah, because the whole time you're like, this guy's so full of nonsense. And most of the people who are a little more cynical, like Vimes, are like, really? Really? Monks, huh? But he actually is getting them from monks. Just
I put up something in general earlier, and it was talking about double sarcasm. So Vines could say something sarcastic and cut your own throat, would pretend like he didn't understand that it was sarcastic and give it back to him with that innocent, wide-eyed, enthusiastic look. And that is a perfect example of double sarcasm and how effective it can be.
Yeah, I enjoyed when we got descriptions of like the crowds and cut my own throat.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even say it. And like selling, dragon finders, which is like just the stick that lights on fire, and
Yeah.
I don't know, it's very charming. And like one of the things that I think like really helped dig into like the description of like the city and the people, like he seemed like very almost an extension of the city's character. I don't know.
I think Dibbler is absolutely a voice box for the city to speak through.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a role he has in every book in Ankh-Morpork, because he's in every book in Ankh-Morpork. Lost Limey says, hot sausage in a bun made from genuine pork product.
And somebody actually eats one, I think. Was that Carrot who was brave enough?
Does someone actually eat one? Because
or maybe it was indigestion for the dragon. I remember they were surprised that it happened.
I distinctly recall. Oh, is that one of the last things Errol eats before becoming a super dragon?
He does eat it. Yeah, like one that's like discarded in the gutter or something.
That sounds right.
Which we haven't even talked about the fact that he's a tiny dragon who's flying by farting, and that he doesn't really have control over it. So it's like you can't catch him because it's sort of a random explosion sort of a thing. Just magnificent.
Too cute.
He ate the shoe polish and the doorknob. And
the kettle.
The lantern oil.
Yes.
I particularly love when Errol flies off and they're like, is he leaving? And I think it's Sergeant Colin is like, well, he wouldn't eat our kettle and then just leave. That's not a thing you do.
Oh, when Carrot and Vimes got him little toys.
Oh yeah, and then they were like, they didn't want to admit it.
That was so cute.
So, I don't know if this is too deep of a dive, but I was reading this and I was like, that's the name of the Weasleys, like owl that like runs into everything and is like kind of a failure. And I was like, is that what it's
I didn't pick up on that. That's awesome.
Because Errol is like a really weird name. I looked it up and it was inconclusive. It was mentioned in the Harry Potter wiki,
right,
as maybe, but
well, they do all read each other, and so there's little subtle homages going in various directions. It's, gotta love it.
Yeah, I think that's the only other time I've ever encountered that name either, Lauren. So I was like, oh, Errol, like the Weasley's owl, only I'm sure it was the other way around when these owls got their names, or owls and dragons.
I was thinking that both were a reference to Errol Flynn of adventure film fame back in the 40s, 50s?
I'd go with 40s maybe.
I don't
or there could be
recall.
another Britty Errol.
There's apparently, from my looking it up, there's a town in Scotland named Errol.
I don't know. I don't know what the link may be.
It's like maybe it's an old-fashioned name that is associated with kind of like useless nerdy characters or something, and so they're like, this is a great human name to apply to this particular somewhat useless animal that we're not really sure what's up with it, and it just happens to be the same one. I don't know.
I don't know. It's possible.
It's good to have some mystery left.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lost Limey says regarding Dibbler's sausages, someone starts to eat one. I think Errol might be the only character who gets close to finishing one. Which actually I think that's where the one that Errol eats comes from, is someone starts to eat it and then they just like casually discard it. Lost Limey also says Harry Potter looks like a Ponder Stibbins tribute. And then Errol is an older, lower class Cockney name.
Okay.
All things I had not known. All right. Well, we can always continue the conversation on guards in chat. I would like to jump now into talking a little bit about To Be Taught If Fortunate, which Lauren, I believe, was one of your suggestions.
Yep.
So Becky Chambers, we've read a little Becky Chambers here on Book Club. We know a thing or two about how she do. So tell us a little bit about the book. I know you did when we initially suggested it. Oh, Sharon's prepared.
Sharon has my copy.
That was like a QVC hold too. That was just beautiful.
Oh, it's magnificent.
So it's about a crew of scientists that are in a ship, and they set out, and they are going to like the far reaches of the whatever explored space to document things, to be scientists and explorers. And there's lots of really cool like theoretical science stuff about how we would, like, humans would adapt to alien planets and the nature of scientific discovery. But anyway, while they're out there, something goes wrong, and there's a bit of a mystery, and there's lots of, I don't know, questions about like what's the right thing to do, how they should go about their science. It's kind of like a love letter to exploration and scientific discovery, I think.
Now, if I'm recalling correctly, the last Becky Chambers book we read was A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very clearly a like band of misfits, found family becoming true family, exploration of personal interaction and kind of like personal growth as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to be at all in that vein, or are we kind of doing a very different vibe here, since this is more like science and exploration?
There's still some common themes with like found family a bit, but it leans a lot more towards science and exploration than it does like culture and interpersonal interactions.
I dig it. I'm about this.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
I'm excited to get into it. For those of us who ordered our copies through Alpha Comics and Games, it was back ordered. So apparently we're not the only ones getting into this particular book. I'm guessing some people are getting it as gifts during the holiday season. But they are in stock now. They came in, I believe, this past weekend on Saturday. So if you haven't already picked up your copy, Tree, I know yours is getting mailed to you.
Yes,
so
they're taking care of me. Thank you for that.
You can anticipate that being shipped out, or maybe it already has been shipped. You would know better than I would. I don't get to stay abreast of all of these things.
I told them not to stress over it because there's going to be a good time to read it. It's,
But for the rest of us, we can pick up our copies anytime we like. provided alpha is open. Don't try to break into alpha to get your copy. That makes paying for it really hard. Also, then the police become involved, and it's a whole scene. Just don't.
So
Don't worry
don't
about
even
that.
go and just check to see if the door is locked.
Yeah, don't check to see if the door is locked, and then if it isn't, just help yourself to a copy or two, Nabi style. But yes, it is currently in stock for those of us that ordered it. If you haven't ordered a copy yet and you would like to, Alpha Comics, I'm sure, would be happy to accommodate you, provided it is not once again on back order now that they got theirs. I'm super excited to get into this. But with that, I believe it is time to move into one of my favorite parts of book club, which is nominations. Nominations. Lauren, I saw happy claps from you, and so I'm going to guess that you are probably better prepared than any of the rest of us with a nomination or two.
I do. I was also it's also one of my favorite parts of book club because I get to see what other people like and are reading and want to read. But I have a couple of suggestions, I guess. I'll do the two that I haven't read, which I guess is kind of risky.
Ooh.
But one is The Poppy War. This is, I think, it's not that thick, but I think it's like a fairly heavy fantasy book, an Asian-inspired fantasy about an assassin,
Ooh.
criminal empire, peasant girl, elite military school. Sorry, I'm trying to read the back, but I've heard really, really good things. And yeah, it sounds really good.
Now, Poppy, isn't Poppy one of the things that is key to creating opium?
Mm-hmm.
So is that kind of what we're getting into here? Is a like opium crime ring?
Well, they actually had
novel?
opium wars. Didn't they call them the opium wars?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how factual that is because I've heard that what we got in America as far as news about things like opium was extremely overblown in kind of a nationalist, we can't trust anybody from over there because they're drug addicted, like the sort of sketchy propaganda. But I don't know that much about the actual factual, so I'm curious.
I think it has something to do with the magic powers in this universe.
Oh, okay. All right. Count me even more interested. Who is the author on that one?
This is R.F. Kuang.
I've got it. All right. So that's our first suggestion. Sharon, do you have a suggestion for us this month?
I waive my suggestions again to Lauren because the only book that I read this past month was the one for book club.
All right. I'm going to share, Lauren, I'm going to have you break up your suggestions a little bit. So
Yeah.
Tree, what do you have for us?
You know, I don't know that I thought about that.
I can drop my suggestion if you need a minute.
Well, I was telling you about one of my favorites being The Flight of the Horse by Larry Niven. So I could drop that in there. It's an old one, but it's a goodie.
Yeah, absolutely. You said Flight of the Horse?
Yeah.
Larry Niven. All right. I've got that recorded. Let's see. Fofacy just dropped one into chat and recommended Ali Brosh's Hyperbole and a Half. And,
Oh, yes. Yes.
Solutions and Other Problems. Fofacy, I'm gonna say let's do one of those instead of both. Which would you put above the other? And while we're waiting on that, Lost Limey suggested that since Cyberpunk 2077 just came out on consoles, that perhaps we should go back to a older school cyberpunk story with Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, which has been suggested a couple of times and is as Lauren had guards sitting on a shelf for a year, just staring at her, being like, "Someday you will read me." I have had Snow Crash sitting on a shelf for over a year, saying, "One day your time will come." Okay, so I recorded Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. Fofasi is suggesting Hyperbole and a Half to start. Hyperbole.
Because honestly, if you read that one, you'll be so hooked, you'll go read the other one anyway.
That's been how a lot of our books have gone.
Such good therapy. Oh my gosh, I love her.
My book recommendation for this month is going to be, I think I've suggested this once before, so it'll also be a repeat, is Robert Asprin's Another Fine Myth, which is not quite Terry Pratchett's satirical, but is also high fantasy with a very like tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude. It's another book that I read when I was 12 or 13 or so, and it was very informative very formative rather, as kind of like my sense of humor was developing and things like that. And I've been interested in revisiting it just to kind of see, like, does it hold up, or am I going to reread it and be like, oh my gosh, I hadn't realized there's problematic things in here and I hadn't known because I was 12 at the time.
No, I think it'll hold up.
I'll be intrigued to explore that. Lauren, you have a second nomination for us, I believe.
I was debating between two, but I'm going to go with this one.
Okay.
This is Compass Rose by Anna Burke. I have read this one. It's by, I don't want to say an independent author, but like definitely less known. So basically it's set in several hundred years in the future. And the seas have risen, climate apocalypse, and humanity's kind of living on sort of islands, and the seas are controlled by these like big armadas. And Compass Rose has a sort of almost supernatural navigation ability, and she gets assigned to be undercover on a pirate ship, and she has to team up with the pirates to like save the day.
Ooh.
It's super fun, super high adventure, like kind of gritty future sea pirates, lesbians, very fun.
Hell
Sounds
yeah.
awesome.
I remember reading your review of that on your Instagram and being like, I want to read that.
Yeah. The vibe is almost steampunk. Like a lot of the like the pirate ships will like submerge, and there's like bioluminescent like algae that lights them up, and it's like very fun.
That sounds wonderful.
But that's my other suggestion.
I don't know how we vote on that. That's just terrible.
I've got all the suggestions put together, and this time for sure, I know I keep saying this time I'm going to write the Facebook post ahead of time so that I can schedule it to post on Friday so that I don't miss it again, because that keeps being a thing that I do. And then people are like, weren't you gonna post a poll? Was that yesterday that you were gonna do that? And I'm like,
But has anyone been upset about it?
Oh, no one's been mad. This is purely a me for my own peace of
Personal
mind
goal.
and
Okay.
personal satisfaction. If I can get this to actually, like, the poll to start on Friday so that it ends on Sunday, like I've always intended, then that will help me feel like an accomplished individual this month, which I think
like
is something you can all
iterative
use,
improvements, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Every time we circle, we learn a little more and do a little better. I can get behind that.
That sounds very Reincarnation Blues. I don't know if were you
I haven't
around?
read that.
Oh, that was an earlier book club recommendation. You might check it out. Reincarnation Blues. It's a Michael Poore novel, and we had many thoughts. And I think that video is up on YouTube on the Goblins and Growlers channel.
Oh, awesome.
So if
Yeah,
you
I've
go,
been thinking I need to go catch up.
we actually got to have Michael Poore on for that one. So if you find yourself with time to read, you might consider reading that and then going and checking out the video so that you can kind of get in on our thoughts. And I know at the very least I'm always happy to revisit things in book club chat because I read that recently enough that my brain is still fresh enough on it that I still have thoughts. This isn't like Guards, which I read back in, I think, like 2010. And at this point, like before I'd read it just now, I was like, I vaguely remember the things that happened in this book, but I don't remember a lot of how I felt about it other than positive. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Some of Pratchett, the real genius is that so much of it is in the little things that you have in that moment, and so you don't remember them as a great thematic structure, but the joy that you take in them in that moment, you remember that part, and I think that's why it's so much fun to reread.
Somebody, I don't know if this won't make sense as an analogy, but somebody was mentioning watching a lot of Letterkenny, and like the density of jokes that's in Letterkenny reminded me a little bit of the density of jokes that's in Guards or like Blackadder, where there's like
yeah,
the setting is like satirical and like everything about it from like, I don't know, it just like you really have to pay attention or you're gonna miss some stuff.
There's a little bit of like, not only is the world kind of its own joke, but then the jokes within the world reflect things in the real world a little bit. And so it's like memes today. Like you can look at a meme. I saw one recently that was a Twitter post it's like the was something like virologist, and it shows if you're all familiar with the Vine, two guys sitting in a hot tub 6 feet apart because they're not gay. And it says the post, like the caption on it, it's just the image. It's not the video. It's just the image of that. And the caption is, they were clearly very far ahead of their time. And it's like, there's so many layers that go into this Twitter post meme that like if you were unaware of like one of three things, you're like, what is he talking about?
Exactly.
it's like those far sights that you don't get.
Kind of,
yeah. Like funny, and you get one and you're like, what?
Or I think probably the greatest example of this is Looney Tunes. Because a lot of us grew up watching Looney Tunes, and there's a ton of jokes in there that are distinctly referential to things that existed then. Like Acme Corporation was an actual company.
And they did it for adults too, because everybody watched it together. Right. And so when it shifted to children's programming like Teletubbies, that is not multi-level like that, it's aimed just at the children, that was when the madness of parenthood began.
Well, now you can't watch those programs because you're like, I can feel my brain leaking out of my ears. I cannot with this.
I watched all of those because I had my kids in 2 shifts and they overlapped, so I like, it's just mush. Total mush.
It's totally fair. I've when my little sister was coming up, there was some children's programming that I was like, this is terrible. I cannot watch this. It's too much. I cannot. I'll be in the other room. Okay. Well, we've got our nominations for next month. This month we're reading To Be Taught If Fortunate, which I'm very excited about. More Becky Chambers in my life. Yes, please. And it is a shorter read, which should make things a little bit easier for us. Quick, somebody talk about something, because I forgot to look at the calendar to determine when our next meetup was.
Oh no.
Okay, so Christmas is coming and we should all buy books for people. And so I had one of my friends went to Alpha Comics and they got world building D&D books and gave them to his favorite dungeon master, but he couldn't catch up with him. So he dropped him off at my house and the DM came over to my house and I gave him and he looked at him and his face just got like all squishy and he actually literally hugged him. So you can do this for people. It's time to go down to Alpha and get some books for people. We need those for Christmas.
That's a great plug. I love that.
It was good to watch.
Our next book club is going to be Tuesday, as always, January the 12th. And then we as a group, I think the three of us, Lauren, Sharon, and myself, need to figure out, is book club going to move back to earlier in the month on the 9th of February, or is it going to move later in the month on the 23rd? And we'll have that conversation. We'll figure out what we want to do with that. And then we'll let you all know what to expect next book club. But for now, I think let's do our plugs. Tree did a beautiful plug for Alpha Comics and Games in Willow Lawn, Richmond, Virginia. So Sharon, I know you have something to plug that's at Alpha Comics and Games in Willow Lawn in Richmond, Virginia.
Yes. Goblins and Growlers just put out a book of adventures that are based on fairy tales. You can get it at Alpha Comics. You can get it online. It's a good Christmas present for your DM. A bunch of people who are involved in book club helped with the project. Lauren did some editing. Josh did a lot of monster crafting editing. So yeah.
Woohoo!
It's such a good book, y'all. I really, really enjoyed everything about it, and just conceptual. When Sharon said what the concept was going to be, I was already excited. So when seeing it all like come to reality was even better. So pleased about that.
I think one of the artists was in chat earlier, but I don't know if she's still there.
Lauren, what would you like to plug today?
I don't have anything specific to plug. Other than, I suppose, my Instagram at Feminist Reading List, where I read and review and talk about sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. And I've sort of started talking about manga a little bit, which I've always read, but never posted about because I didn't think anybody was interested in me geeking out about manga. But I don't know, I'm testing the waters a little bit. I just started reading the My Hero Academia manga, trying to get caught up on that. So
I'm familiar.
If you build it, they will come.
I'm familiar with the anime series, and so I'm keen on digging into your thoughts a little bit on the manga series as well. I can take a look at your Instagram and be like, ooh, and then maybe go book club. Yeah.
I don't want to do that. The only thing I've posted about it is that I'm excited to read it, and that All Might is very cut in the comics. So
well, I mean that's as good an advertisement as any, is that coming soon to a feminist book reading list near you. More manga information. I like it. For my plug, I'm going to throw a couple of things out there. Thing number one is Quid Pro Roll, which is our Dungeons and Dragons actual play podcast, which is shenanigans and dragons and wrestling and big plot feels for a lot of people on a semi-regular basis. If you haven't checked it out already, we've got a recap episode that's at release number 80, I want to say. It says Quid Pro Recap on it, and it lists what episodes it's recapping. So start there. Don't start at the first 3 episodes, because like we had no idea what we were doing back then. It's a lot easier to hear us just do a synopsis, and then if you love everything from there to modern, then go back and look at the old stuff after you already know that we figure out what we're doing eventually. Lost Limey points out that I left out murderous horses. Well, there's one murderous horse in the podcast. The other thing that I'm going to highlight is that stuff like book club isn't possible without the support of our listenership and the folks who were coming out to brewery games and folks who are on book club right now. And so we've got a Patreon which we use to help fund all of this. We wouldn't have a Zoom license if it wasn't for y'all. We wouldn't have things like the recording equipment if it wasn't for you all. So if you're able to help us out with that at all, our website is patreon.com/goblins growlers. We've got a lot of different levels of support, but anything that you've got that could help us allows us to continue doing things like Sharon's Feats of Excursa book, which is really exceptional and really beautiful and really excellent. And so we really appreciate anything that you all can do to help us continue to bring you really great content and create a space where everybody can be together. I think that's everything that I've got for tonight. Does anybody else have any final thoughts before we sign off? All set? All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Happy holidays.
I thank everybody
All
for
of
coming in.
them.
Happy
Festivus
holidays.
is coming. Give a book for Festivus.
Take care, and we will see you next book club.
Good night.
Bye.